6:45, Congressman John Lewis responding to 11Alive's exclusive reporting on the reopening of the Atlanta child murder investigation. The civil rights activist was just starting his political career at the height of the murders 40 years ago. Naima Abdullahi has the story.
The civil rights icon John Lewis responded to my reports on the Atlanta child murders and everything that has unfolded in the last few months about the case. He says, quote, "The murders of 29 African-American boys between 1979 and 1981 is a gruesome, terrible chapter of Atlanta's history. Ever since the conviction of Mr. Wayne Williams, there has been ongoing doubt and questioning surrounding the insufficient evidence in these cases. I am glad that the city, under the leadership of Mayor Bottoms, is reopening the cases and trying to use present-day technologies to determine the facts around what happened to these young children. Their families have lived too long in sorrow. They deserve answers, they deserve closure, and the little children whose lives were cut short deserve justice," end quote. In 1981, Congressman Lewis was serving as an Atlanta City Council member. Today, as member of Congress, he's still actively following the search for answers. As an advocate and an activist, he's proud of the direction the city is taking to finally get closure for the families.
And for more on our exclusive stories on the Atlanta child murders, visit our website, 11alive.com.